Welcome back to Ultra Life Today. This is going to be the third segment with Dr. Deanna Wyndham. I'm Josh Bellew, Chief Product Evangelist of Ultra Botanica, and I'm hanging out with my dear friend. What's your name?
Adam Payne. I'm the CEO and inventor of UltraCure technology.
One of the lead inventors in this amazing technology that has changed thousands of lives and that is used by doctors all over the globe.
All over the globe.
It's a fact. And we're here with Dr. Deanna Wyndham, and she was just sharing with us when her world kind of began to totally shut down with this autoimmune disorder that had basically been traveling with her since she was 9 months
Literally,
old.
her organs did shut down.
Yes.
I mean, you were septic.
And let's talk for a second. There's a lot of people listening that don't understand MRSA and what being septic is. Could you guys give a brief description so people understand what that is?
Sure, go ahead.
Idea. So, MRSA is MRSA, methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, which is just a long way to say it's a bacteria that is resistant to most antibiotics that we know.
It does not respond to most standard antibiotics, And sepsis is what happens when the immune system gets so overwhelmed that the something called complement cascades start happening. It's the body goes into an emergency situation when it is essentially trying to preserve central organ function at the expense of peripheral function in the body.
And Adam, just as an aside, I heard you say on one of our interviews one day that in Europe, they have a much different way to sanitize, do antibacterial things in hospitals. But here in the United States, we have problems with that, right?
Yeah, well, a lot of European hospitals actually shut down for 1 month a year to completely disinfect the internal surfaces of the hospital.
And that is where these staph infections and things like this originate, isn't it?
We call them nosocomial infections. It's a nice sounding word, which means hospital acquired or healthcare acquired infections. And these are the nastiest places, the nastiest infections you can get. Mm-hmm. So you were working in LTACs, long-term assisted living or long-term care situations where MRSA is probably quite common, and you had open skin issues with psoriasis. What happened?
So as I was breaking out in cysts that would become boils, and those boils were tested and found to be MRSA, but again, as I said, nobody believed it. So I had several of these boils before anybody truly believed that I had MRSA because they thought it was just on my skin.
Wow. So this was subcutaneous pockets of infection.
Right. And that's why they didn't believe it was MRSA, because it would start below the skin and then come out on my skin. And by the time I was diagnosed, I spent, to be fair, a lot of people deal with sepsis. I had a fairly mild case as far as sepsis is concerned because it was caught early.
Good. Thank God.
I was super lucky in that. And the residency director that I worked with, while being relatively mean, was also a brilliant physician. And so,
what a sweet way to describe someone. Relatively mean. That was so sweet.
So did he spot your symptoms and say?
He didn't spot them, but as I was sick and came in to be treated, he's the one that started to put the pieces together.
Okay.
And figure out what was going on. At that point, I had a lot of brain fog. He'd been pretty mad at me for a while because he had to repeat things to me over and over again, and I didn't seem to be learning as fast. And now we know it was, because of the developing infections at autoimmune cascade.
Yeah. All those cytokines were just like screaming in your blood system. So what happened?
So I ended up getting treated. I was on IV vancomycin that had to be given even after I left the hospital. I would have to halt my residency twice a day, get my IV vancomycin, and then go back to work.
Wow.
And the doctors at the time said, okay, well, you're newly diagnosed with lupus, but we can't treat the lupus very well because of the MRSA infections. And so, with your long history, you're probably looking at dying before the age of 40. We just kind of think you should know.
Okay, Adam, give me just a second here. I have been so remiss. This is Dr. Deanna Wyndham we're listening to this amazing story of her own journey, which I know is absolutely going to impact so many people's lives, because she was on a quest, obviously, to ultimately get well and to find out why she was sick. But she's a medical director with Reclaim Your Health, and you can actually go to...
It's actually Whole Human Life.
Oh,
Reclaim Your Health is our tagline.
Beautiful. Okay, Whole Human Life. And so you can go to a website, WHLclinics.com. That's W as in we, H as in health, L as in languishing, because she was languishing for so many years. Anyway, WHLclinics.com. And also you can email her at info@wholehumanlife.com. There is an 800 number. You can reach out to her as well. It's 888-338-3408. And this is Whole Human Life, WHLclinics.com. And thank you for letting me give that plug. I've been remiss in not saying it enough.
Well, thank you.
Of course.
So you recover from your sepsis. You're still in your residency. What changed?
I continued on my I'm going to change my word from subversive to iconoclastic.
Oh, God. I love you. Oh, my gosh.
So you were still determined that you were going to change the way people looked at medicine, because we're not going to just treat people's disease. We want to bring them into wholeness and wellness.
Right.
And here you were suffering from significant lupus, psoriasis. You had just been with psoriatic arthritis.
Since 9 months old.
And
wow.
Yeah, and gut issues like most people with autoimmune disease, and brain issues and fatigue issues. But luckily, as I was growing up, my parents didn't know I had autoimmune disease. Since I didn't know that, we had the good old Oklahoma motto of pick yourself up, dust yourself off, and keep going.
You didn't claim the brand, did you?
Correct.
That's great.
And so, and my family they're all superstars.
Yeah.
In helping me to keep going, helping me as I was moving through all of this in every way that they could.
Okay. So I'm waiting for the moment, kind of the cross the Jordan River moment here, because all I'm hearing up to this point of I'm training, I'm going through my residency, people are knocking me down, telling me I'm only going to live till 40 years old.
Yes.
I got all these diseases, and you're still the iconoclastic firebrand in the midst of all this, pulling yourself up, gritting your teeth through the pain, the fatigue, the suffering. And what happens? What did you do?
So I tried to be the good doctor. At that time, there weren't really, Dr. Whitaker was a trailblazer. But
oh, my goodness, yes.
Yeah.
The pioneers.
Yeah. There weren't a lot of doctors that were doing any form of holistic medicine at the time.
Oh, yeah.
And so I tried to join mainstream medicine and bring a holistic approach to it.
That sounds like a train wreck ready to happen.
It was a train wreck. That's exactly how it turned out.
Definitely.
I wish I'd had that foresight, but it didn't take me very long. It was less than 6 months after graduating from my residency when I heard Dr. Whitaker on the radio.
Oh, wow.
And so I just called them up and I said, hi, you guys. I'm a doctor and I've had all this amazing training, but I don't know what to do with it. And I wonder if you know anybody who's looking for a doctor like me.
Now Julian Whitaker is known to be a compassionate individual. Yes.
He is.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
This is so cool.
Yeah. And all of his staff were the same. And at that point, I spoke to Susie Heald. I happened to get her, and she was the office administrator. And she said, well, Dr. Wyndham, as it happens, we're looking for a doctor.
Wow.
I so love divine intervention. This is awesome.
It was
Was
so
that heaven
beautiful.
meeting earth at that moment for you?
It really, really was. I went for an interview there, and I met Dr. Whitaker, and he changed my life and saved my life at the same time.
Okay, there's a whole lot more that we need to talk about. We've got about 6 minutes.
We got more time here. Yeah.
Yes. Well, I got to hear about this.
Yeah, we want to understand. So, where was his clinic's out in California, right?
Newport Beach.
Newport Beach. Okay, so you fly out there. Were you married at this point? Did you have any earthly ties?
Right. So I got married a couple years after moving to Southern California.
Okay.
And
so this was after you joined Dr. Whitaker's group.
No.
Before?
So that was when I was still in my residency program. When I got married.
All right.
And we were actually living in Santa Monica at the time. And I was working
place.
in an office in Santa Monica.
Okay.
So Newport Beach was an hour drive.
Yep, not too bad.
Balboa Island, all those
so
fun
I
little
didn't even
places
have
out there.
to, yeah.
Yep.
So you ended up joining his clinic, and did he kind of put you in training mode for a while, or what happened?
Yeah, they had a training program, which was basically reading all of Dr. Whitaker's stuff. So he has books, he has
papers, probably.
Yeah, all sorts of things. And then learning all of the therapies. So Whitaker Wellness at that time, which unfortunately now is no longer in existence, but Whitaker Wellness at that time was a 20,000 square foot facility, and I was the sixth doctor. And
20,000 square feet. That's a lot of that. Wow.
And we had 120 employees, I believe.
Wow.
2 acupuncturists, a reflexologist, an IV room that had 30 chairs.
Back when this was just unheard of.
Chambers.
Back when this was unheard of, Adam. It's crazy.
So were you? I feel like you were a kid in a candy store at this.
It was amazing.
So finally, you were in a place that was about healing and changing people's lives, and so he saved your life essentially.
Right. Because.
Go ahead.
What was this intervention? I want to know.
Because what happened was, and Dr. Whitaker mainly focused on cardiovascular health, diabetes. I mean, the metabolic system and lifestyle changes.
So what years were this? Are we looking at 2005?
Right, early 2000s. So we're looking at 2005, 4 or 5 was when I joined Whitaker Wellness.
So just to put it in perspective, this is just at the time when Remicade, an infusion for TNF alpha, was just coming on the market. It was the first biologic therapy. So the immunology space was all afire about, we have new tools to deal with autoimmune disease. So that was in context. Was Dr. Whitaker at all, did that become part of your paradigm? Or what changed?
So Dr. Whitaker, interestingly enough, wasn't really that interested in autoimmune disease.
Okay.
But he allowed that I was. And as a physician there, I could get all of the treatments there. And that's what I say saved my life. He didn't actually treat me as a physician, but we had this amazing, what I call a brain trust there. Between all of us doctors, there was over 150 years of experience at Whitaker Wellness.
Wow.
Yeah,
so cool.
And he knew personally, like Brzezinski, and he had studied under some of the big names, and
Wheel and those guys, all of those people. So what healed you? I mean,
it was a combination of things. So I ended up developing, and here I'm saying this now because it ends up being many things. That, like most people with autoimmune disease, it's a very complicated process.
Sure.
But in the process of learning, studying, growing, and learning from all of these big minds and putting the pieces together, what I came up with was what I call an epigenetic trigger model for treating autoimmune
before
disease.
epigenetic was a word.
Right.
Wow.
But remember, I love the neurologic system and genetics. These were like my two of my first loves. And there's the Genetic Research Center, which is what I was looking forward to joining in my neurology residency.
That makes so much sense.
And that ended up not coming about. But in the early years of epigenetic research, I was following that.
So let's just put in context for everybody. Epigenetics is the science of how our DNA can shift into different configurations. So when epigenetics happens, typically when the DNA changes a methylation state, and it starts to present a whole different libraries of DNA to the cell, essentially either starting a different life cycle or a different way of functioning. And we're only, I think, really only now in the medical community starting to appreciate how epigenetics plays a role in human health. But it sounds like you had an earlier insight.
Our dear friend Kyle Drew says this, and I love to coin this phrase. He goes, epigenetics isn't even old enough to drink yet. I love that. He's
That
like,
is a
we're
very
learning
good way of
so
putting
much. We're learning so much in the last few years.
But this sounds like the epigenetics has become a part of your DNA.
Right.
To coin the phrase, right?
That's a very good way to put it.
So how did you learn? What did you learn about yourself, Deanna?
So what I learned is that what I learned to call the triggers, or the things that turn on, if you will. I'm using my imaginary finger quotes.
You got the quotes there going, yeah.
The risk for disease, and that risk is an epigenetic change.
Wow.
And as that risk for autoimmune disease or other diseases gets turned on, you start to have the symptoms of it.
Right.
And theoretically, a risk that can be turned on
should be able to turn it off.
Nice.
Exactly.
Right. So what turns off your disease?
For me, I was a relative train wreck. So I had chronic infections that were part of the problem, endocrine imbalance. So my adrenals were crashed, my hormones were out of balance, my thyroid was out of balance.
So there was a storm of out of balance things. Mm-hmm. And did you find you had to bring everything? So you had to bring the deficiencies, address the deficiencies, balance the gut.
Microbiome imbalance.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Food sensitivities.
Oh, my gosh.
Dietary issues. I also had, I ended up having mercury toxicity issues, or environmental toxins.
Okay, time to push pause. You've been listening to Dr. Deanna Wyndham. She's a doctor of osteopathy, board certified in family medicine, someone that goes way back in the day with Dr. Julian Whitaker, which I know a lot of people are going, oh, she actually trained with this guy. And I'm sitting with Adam Payne, CEO and founder of Ultra Botanica. Brother, who am I?
Yeah, we got Josh Bellew here.
Yeah.
And this has been Ultra Life today. Just stay tuned for the break. We'll be right back.
Thanks for rejoining us for Ultra Life today. I'm Josh Bellew, and you are?
Adam Payne. We're here in the studios with Dr. Deanna Wyndham, and we've been just going through her life story.
Talk about an emotional journey that has all these literal spiritual intervention points, Adam. It's blowing my mind.
You know, it's a train wreck that healed itself, and through. And what I love about when we just before we went to the break, and I asked you, well, what brought you healing? It wasn't one thing. It wasn't like saying, well, I eliminated wheat out of my diet. You talked about the micronutrients. You had heavy metal toxicity.
You talked about a brain trust. God brought you into a whole bunch of different minds that had been trained in different
microbiome,
ways,
right? And then all sorts of other things. Where did you start? Was it with the microbiome, or where did you start your journey for wellness? What was the first thing you did?
Actually, the first thing I did was a brain map, which has to do with neurofeedback, and that's for a whole nother story.
Oh, brain map.
Adam can tell you a little bit about
fun.
biofeedback.
But
my dad, just as an aside, my stepdad, Burl Payne, he invented biofeedback instruments back in the 60s.
I knew you would love that.
The nerves, the skin transport, right? So being able to have a sound that related to how stressed your nervous system was. Anyways, it's so cool, isn't it?
It is very cool.
And neurofeedback is, in my opinion, one of my therapies that I feel that I cannot live without, which is a form of biofeedback tailored specifically for the brain.
Exactly. You get an audible sound that tells you that gives you an idea of whether you're stressed or not. And then you're able to actually
talk yourself down off the ledge,
figure out what attitudes and what thoughts and what feelings get you to calm down or to de-stress your nervous system.
And that's a type of neurofeedback.
Okay.
Yeah. And
you have more.
I've been working with doctors that are real pioneers in the field of neurofeedback therapy, and they have these audio-visual programs
that's cool.
that do feedback very specific to exactly the imbalances in your brain.
Oh my gosh. I'm going to be talking with you after
very
the
powerful.
interview. This is exciting.
How long does, I'm curious, we're going down a rabbit hole and it's okay. Please. How long does it take somebody that once they're hooked up for them to be able to start to manipulate themselves in order to adjust what's going on from the biofeedback side? In my experience, it seems to be pretty quick. Right. And what's your experience?
In a generic standpoint, I would say we tend to do between 20 to 40 what we call sessions with people before we call them done. But remember, we're going for not just to help people control their brains and to control their emotions and their feelings and their thoughts, but we're actually working on optimizing brain function.
So which could change everything, right?
Correct.
Boy, I apologize for the rabbit hole. That's something we're going to have you back just to talk about that. That sounds so fascinating.
Absolutely.
It's really fun.
So, okay, what were we talking about?
So I started there. Yeah. That's where I started.
Okay.
And my brain age at the time, we did this test with it and determined that at 36, my brain age was 86.
Oh.
Right.
What?
And that was just from all of the things I'd been through throughout my life.
My
and so
goodness.
it was amazing that I was still functioning
is that also,
as a physician.
that's neuroplasticity measures, it's all sorts of things. So your brain was just rigid at that point. Ouch.
Yeah, it was. And so I actually started, one of the very first things I started on was low dose naltrexone. And
okay.
This is how I came
for
to
our
it.
listeners, I just have to say something. There's a website you can go to, LDN Trust. Is that
Research
the website?
Trust.
LDN Research Trust. You're listening to Dr. Deanna Wyndham. Whole Human Life is the name of her practice. She's a medical director. The 800 number is 888-338-3408. That's 888-338-3408. Or you can go to whlclinics.com to reach out to her. I was waiting for her to bring up low-dose naltrexone.
This has been one of your favorite topics, Josh.
And it is, because our dear friend Keith Bishop, they compound a boatload of it. Every compounding pharmacist, Adam, that I meet across the country that carries Ultra Botanica products,
they're all low-dose
doing
people.
low-dose naltrexone, and it's this unique thing that I'm going to let Dr. Wyndham talk about. But it seems to have this unique ability to kind of stop autoimmune disorders in their tracks. Did I overstate that? I did. Okay, keep going.
So you started.
You were about to tell us your journey with LDN. So
you started with that. Okay.
Right. So low-dose naltrexone does have an amazing capacity to treat a lot of people with autoimmune disease. And when I say treat, what I mean is it actually stabilizes the autoimmune disease and lowers the inflammation. I call it a true immune system modulator, because things that are overactive come down and things that are underactive come up. And it can be a life changer and a game changer for a lot of people.
It's like adaptogenic herbs, what you just
amazing.
Described.
Right.
And it's a repurposed drug, right?
It is.
Offline, I'm going to pick your brain on this, because I think there's the mesenchymal stem cell population and all of these different regulator cells in the body. It sounds like low-dose naltrexone is it's stimulating those cells to actually come in and play a chaperone role in the body.
This is one of the things that I love, too, is that it's been shown in research to actually change some of the methylation pathways so that it can actually almost directly change those epigenetic changes that are leading to disease in the first place.
That's beautiful. Yeah. And a lot of times the immune system gets stuck, especially if somebody is naturally endocannabinoid deficient, which is, I believe, the primary epigenetic switching mechanism of the body. Sounds like low-dose naltrexone can engender some plasticity in our epigenetic system. So that was the first place.
Right. So I started there, but it wasn't the cure-all that I'd hoped it would be. And so I still had issues going on, and I was a lot better, and I was getting neurofeedback. My brain was a lot better. But
no longer 86 years old in your brain, right?
Correct.
Moving that clock back. That's awesome.
But I needed to find more answers. And so throughout, now this was almost 20 years ago. So through, you know how it is when you're doing something, you tend to gather people towards you. And I started getting a lot of autoimmune patients.
Oh, wow.
And these people were people that lots of them are still with me now and are still my patients these years later,
And
even
they
though I've
became
changed
part of your
states.
journey.
Yes.
They joined you in your journey, right?
Yes.
Gosh.
And we all learned from each other.
Oh, yeah, learn together. That's beautiful.
And so as we went through, we would try something and we would try another thing. I would talk to people around the country. What do we think we should do now? And this is how we came up with these triggers for disease, is in looking for more and more and more answers as we went along.
You know, so I came from the field of immunology. I'm not a trained immunologist, but I'm a serial entrepreneur, and I've started a number of different biotech companies. One of the last companies I participated in developed the gold standard for testing rheumatoid arthritis patients by 11 different biomarkers in the blood. It's called the Vectra DA, and it is the gold standard right now in measuring disease activity by looking at some of these soluble inflammatory markers in the body, rather than just like saying, oh, how many tender and swollen joints you have. Look at what's biochemically happening in the body. So it's fundamentally so interesting to me, the development pathway that you've been on. Curcumin came to me late in my development. I was working with a researcher, B.G. Kurian, who his pet project as a postdoc was curcumin. And I had no interest, Deanna, at the time of doing anything with curcumin because, as you know, curcumin has already been published on. People have been already playing with it. And I thought, there's nothing new under the sun with curcumin. People have already figured this out. Well, in fact, they hadn't. And it was the discovery of what we call liquid protein scaffolding, the idea that curcumin would bind to protein before it would bind to itself. And then we decided to try that, and we bound the curcumin to the protein like ornaments on a Christmas tree. And then as the body digests the protein, the curcumin molecules are freely to absorb into the body. So we knew that curcumin was the ideal modulator of something called NF-kappa beta, which is the gas pedal for inflammation inside the cell. If NF-kappa beta is pushed down and is burning hot, inflammation signaling is coming out of the cell really hot, a lot. You have cytokines and chemokines essentially flowing through the cell membrane out into the interstitial space saying, help, 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 help. And then you back off on the gas pedal, the cell stops sending out those markers. So we knew that curcumin could have a powerful role in the immune system, and that's how we started our business here. Do you think has curcumin played a role in anything that you've done as a DO up to this point?
Absolutely. So at Whitaker Wellness, we had our own supplement store, and curcumin was one of the things that we carried. This was before the days of Ultra Botanica.
Oh, sure, years ago. Yeah.
So we didn't have such an amazingly absorbable form of it, but I would say it was one of the supplements that I would use with all or most of my patients.
You know, there's so many different ingredients that can be used, natural ingredients as well as pharmaceutical interventions to help balance the body from a whole bunch of different angles. You know, one of the things, Josh, we haven't talked about, which is the microbiome a lot. I think we really want to get into that at some point.
And Mary Jane and Keith will be
delighted.
Interview.
You know, maybe we could do a roundtable about the microbiome for people.
Oh, invite them all in.
Invite everybody in, and we'll talk about what is the microbiome. How could you know whether your microbiome is in balance or not?
Dr. Deborah Osment has she's done TED Talks. What is it called? The Forgotten Orifice.
Right.
She does TED Talks.
I don't know if you know her. She was at the last meetup.
She was.
Doc, and she's a dentist, but she's one of the few A4M fellows. And she talks about the connection between oral health and gut health, which is.
I spoke to her. She's
lovely.
I would love to spend more time with her.
She's lovely.
So you started to integrate all these things on a scale of 1 to 10, where you were sick at a 10. Where are you now today in your life? Is everything back into balance? Do you find yourself whole and all the symptoms are gone in your life, or do you have to remain vigilant at this point?
I tell all my autoimmune patients that having autoimmune disease is kind of like being an alcoholic. Always have autoimmune disease and you're always managing it.
You're always managing it. And so you find if you go out of balance that things start to pop up in your life?
Right. So 4 years ago when my entire life crashed and burned. And
I'm sorry.
I lost most everything in my life, including my marriage and my business and a 20-year career that I had been working on. Everything crashed for me. At that point, I was stressed out. I wasn't eating healthy. I'd lost my life savings and everything went downhill. I stopped eating healthy, taking supplements. Everything became out of balance, and I started having a lot of serious
you are
symptoms.
human. That means so much to me to hear you say that and just be transparent and authentic with our audience. It means so much to Adam and I because we've all crashed. We're open books with each other.
Yeah.
Here.
So when you got out of balance, things got bad.
So it got bad again. And there was a time when I wondered if I'd still be able to work. I actually took a job in a wound care center because I couldn't face at that point even practicing or starting my own office for integrative medicine. It was just too much for me to even think about.
So something must have shifted between the crash and then back on your path to wellness. Is there something that changed that got you back on your journey?
I would say one of the 4 areas that are triggers for disease processes are what's going on in our mind. So what we believe, what we think, and stress and how we deal with stress.
So something changed.
I started treating my mind first, and I went back to God, as we all usually do after we crash and burn.
The book of Proverbs, as a person thinks in their heart, so they become.
Right.
Wow.
So you had a amount of transfiguration moment then.
Right. And I realized that my crashing and burning really wasn't the bad, horrible, awful thing that I thought it was. It was exactly what I had asked God for.
New beginning.
Which was the new beginning that I wanted my life to be. It just didn't come in the form that I was expecting.
Okay. We are going to hit the pause button right now. We'll have another segment with Dr. Deanna Wyndham. I say wisdom because I think it's a really good Freudian slip.
I love it.
Dr. Deanna Wisdom. No, Dr. Deanna Wyndham, Whole Human Life. You can reach out to her at WHLclinics.com, or 800 number, 888-338-3408. I'm Josh Bellew. This is Ultra Life Today. We're here with Dr. Deanna Wyndham and my dear friend
Adam Payne over here.
We'll be back.
We'll be right back.